Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. Today's video topic was first mentioned to me by a viewer on my Blood of the Dead Easter egg ending explained video. Now, unfortunately, YouTube has a glitch where once you get past a certain number of comments, it doesn't show you the first comments on the video anymore, and because that video has so many comments and questions from you guys for me to answer in future content, I can't get back to the original comment to see who left it. I hearted it, so you know who you are if you're the one that sent me this message, but otherwise, it was just a very attentive viewer who had noticed something in Blood of the Dead, and we're going to be talking about it today. The events of Black Ops 3 and that cycle are pretty well understood at this point. We feel like we have a pretty good grasp on the fact that the characters go from kind of the giant at the beginning of the game. There's obviously some background stuff with Origins and with Richtofen having gone to Shadows of Evil before he goes to the giant as well. But for the most part, the characters go to the giant and then they go through to Revelations, and that's fairly standard. Now, the point that's been bone of contention, I suppose, has been their trip away to Alcatraz, because that has various different forms at this point. It has the in-cycle form, which is what we see in Black Ops 3. They go, they're there for about 30 seconds, and then they come back, and that's also shown in the comic. Now, I've got the comic here, so I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. Basically, Victus arrives in Alcatraz, and it doesn't make sense that this is Alcatraz, but we're going to run with it for now, and I'll make a separate video on why Craig Houston has just made a weird thing happen here. We'll get to that, but Victus arrives, and they then give the Chronorium to Richtofen. He reads it, and at this point in time, he has no scar under his right eye. Bear that in mind. When he reads the Chronorium, he learns about why the blood is so important, and you basically then see him go and do three things. He goes on this little journey just here. The first thing he does is go and get the Victus blood samples from the zombie Richtofen, who we presume is then going to go to the moon? Wait, no, he's then going to go to post-moon, pre-moon classified. He's going to revive post-moon Richtofen in pre-moon classified. God, that's weird. Then, our boy Richtofen, young Richtofen here, having collected those Victus blood samples, goes and secures the blood of Sal and Finn in Alcatraz. He then goes and gives himself the blood at a much earlier time, pre-Origins, and then he goes back to the Alcatraz prison, goes down the lift, which is visible in the spawn room, pops out, and sees the Victus crew there. He then basically says, "Alright, you lot, stop messing around, just get in the cryopods for goodness sake." And then, a short time later, right on time, we see Primus arrives. Now, we're going to come back to what this looks like in just a second. I want to show you all this in whiteboard form so that we can track exactly how it happens in the comic and in Black Ops 3, and then we can look at the Blood of the Dead variation. This is a bit of a mess, I appreciate, but I had to get my thoughts clear before I made the video because I already tried to record this once and it didn't go very well. So, we're going to first of all focus on the green boxes up here, okay? Don't worry about this stuff just yet. We'll start off at the giant, right? In the giant, we see that opening cutscene. Richtofen doesn't have a scar under his right eye. He kills that Ultimus-looking Richtofen, and then basically goes through the events of the giant, kneels down by his body, all that sort of thing, and then ends up going through to DE. Now, sometime between the giant and DE, Richtofen gets a scar under his right eye. There's a bloody patch there, and that sort of blood on his face is going to build up a little bit as the events of Black Ops 3 progress. That scar, though, becomes an iconic part of his character. It used to be that kind of like bald patch on the side of his head, or like the grey patch. In Black Ops 3, it basically became the scar. Now, in DE, he has the scar. In Zetsubou, he also has the scar. Then, at the end of the Zetsubou Easter egg, they go away, they teleport away. We don't see where they go, but then we presume it's Alcatraz, and they come back, and I think he still has the scar. Now, I need to check from somebody's gameplay on YouTube if he does have the scar after he returns, because I haven't been able to find it just yet. If you know if he has the scar upon returning from Alcatraz in Zetsubou, then please let me know. But in Garrod, he definitely has the scar. You can go to that end cutscene, and it's really clear on his cheek. And then in Revelations, he also still has the scar. You go to the Revelations end cutscene, he's about to get faded out of existence, he's got the scar on his cheek, Monty says, "What to do? What to do?" Richtofen suggests that they go somewhere they've never been, and they end up at the Great War. They raise the staffs above their heads, and I want to make a key point here that's not actually related to this video, but might inspire one of you to make a story video about this. I'll certainly do one very soon. Richtofen does not have the fire staff in the Great War. He... Oh.
Well, you were gonna go. Wait, you were gonna pause there. That's all.
Richtofen does not have the fire staff in the Great War. Nikolai has it. So we don't really know if there's going to be some kind of significance with Nikolai becoming our new leader in blood, and in contrast, Richtofen kind of taking the leadership away from Nikolai and taking that fire gem away from Nikolai when he then ends up going through whatever he does post-Revelations to then get the fire gem and keep it with him in cryo in the Blood of the Dead pod. But that's a topic for another video. So Great War, all the characters have the staves. It's hard to tell if he has the scratch on his face in the ending. If you guys want to do some sleuthing and figure it out, then that would be fantastic, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that he does have the scar there, and I'm going to call that Richtofen Prime, okay? In sort of maths, physics, whatever, you have a regular variant of something, like you might have an A, and then you might have A prime, and that prime will just have a little dash on it, and so a little dash is kind of similar to a little scar. Makes sense to call him Richtofen Prime. One point to note here that kind of you might want to just fit into your own theory about this is that on the Primus scrap, he doesn't appear, it's very hard to tell, he doesn't appear to have a scar. That might be a piece of evidence for the Primus scrap being a different piece of Zombies history to the Revelations ending. And that's been theorized a lot about because the background is entirely different, the people around them are different, there's a load of different stuff going on, and so the Primus ending for Revelations may well not be what the Primus scrap shows, and this might be more evidence for that. Anyway, we now need to talk about their trip here. We're going to go by the events of the comic in order to do this, because the comic, as I understand it right now, and I assume, and I recognize that I'm making an assumption which is risky in this business, but I'm going to assume that the comic canon is the normal loop canon. We're going to rewind a little bit and talk about the things that I just mentioned. Victus secure the chronorium, right? That's pretty standard. They then get to the lab, and the lab, Richtofen, reads the chronorium. That's Richtofen very early on his journey in the 2-year gap. So he has gone to Origins, he's gone to the house, I believe, as well. He's dipped out from the other characters, he's gone on this journey, he reads the chronorium there, and he learns the importance of the blood. At that point, that Richtofen has no scar, okay? So Victus gives him the chronorium, he reads it, then he goes and does those 3 things that I mentioned from the comic. Now, a key point from the comic is that when Victus then enter cryostasis just there, you can see that they are in the following order. We've got Misty, then Russman, then Stuhlinger, and then Malton. So their order there is different to what we see in Blood of the Dead. We'll come back to that point though, okay? So they enter cryo there, and that's their order. Abigail Brierton, Russman, Sam Stuhlinger, Malton Johnson. Primus then arrives moments later, as we see at the end in the final page of the comic. He says, right on time, and they then get there. Now, in all of these panels, we cannot see whether the Richtofen arriving has the scar on his right cheek or not. We see him here, but we don't see his right cheek. We see him there, no right cheek. And then we see him there, and his head's cut off. Not literally. So, we're going to assume that he does have the scar at that point, okay? Just for the sake of argument. So I've written here he could have the scar, Primus arrive on time, okay? So this is regular loop, nothing crazy going on. Primus then take the Victus blood from Richtofen, who has just got it from Zombie Richtofen a bit earlier on. I should have written that down here. And then Primus leaves. That whole chain of events takes about 30 seconds. They jump in, yoink, thanks for the blood, I'm out, see ya. Laboratory Richtofen then looks back at the chronorium and goes, I missed something. The location of the summoning key. And so he then goes and steals the key in Morgue City. Okay, so that's the Shadows of Evil end cutscene. He comes in, yoink, takes the summoning key, and then dips out into a portal. He then goes and secures his own soul, and that's not the giant, that's not where he gets his soul. He gets an innocent Richtofen soul from dimension 2210, and then goes and puts that in the house, so that Samantha in the house is joined by Eddie. And we hear about that a bunch in Black Ops 3. Samantha says, there's a new friend, but he doesn't like sharing the toys. That's Kid Eddie. That's Richtofen's innocent soul being put in the house just here. Then, after all of that, Richtofen finally goes to the Giant, okay? That's the Lab Richtofen. So Lab Richtofen then goes through all these events, he gets the scar just here, and then he goes through Black Ops 3, he goes and visits his younger self from there, and then he keeps going through up top, while his younger self goes through down below, and then ends up going on this little conveyor belt here through these events. That's fine. There's nothing really to worry about there. That's how we understood it, right? Richtofen gets the scar there, basically, and that's the end of the story. But in Blood of the Dead, things change, okay? This new version of events, the deviation from the comic, is as follows. Victus secure the Chronorium, or at least somebody does. We're assuming it's Victus, because it would be a really weird detail for them to change that point, and the Chronorium ends up getting to the lab, so it pretty much has to have been Victus to do it. Now, at some point, before Primus even get there, Laboratory Richtofen is meant to read the Chronorium, and he won't necessarily notice it, he won't know that this is the case, but the pages have changed from what the other timeline was seeing happen. So he's going to find out the importance of the blood, that still does have to happen, but we don't know if he ends up going and doing those 3 things that I mentioned up here, or if he sends another person to do it, or if there's some kind of difference in anything there at all, we just don't know. All we know is that he becomes aware of the fact that Richtofen is going to arrive and that he needs to dip out as soon as possible when he does so. Now, amongst all of that, Victus, when they give him the Chronorium, end up getting into the pods in a different order. Before, Abigail and Stuhlinger were in the 1st and 3rd positions respectively, whereas now, in Blood of the Dead, they're in the 1st and 3rd positions, but swapped around. In fact, I can probably show you that in theatre right now. Here we go. There's Russman, actually. There's Stuhlinger in the leftmost pod, then there's Russman, then there's Abigail, and then there's Martin. So that order is completely different to what we see in the final frame of the comic right there. Discrepancy, don't know why. Also, another point to mention is that there are other differences between the Blood intro and the comic, such as who goes up to the actual pods and says, who are these guys? It's Dempsey in the comic, it's Nikolai in the intro. Just their whole point of arrival is different. They obviously end up displaced a little bit. We don't know what causes them to be late and to have all these changes going on, other than the Chronorium changing for an unknown reason. Anyway, things have changed. They're in a different order. They enter Cryo. We're sort of okay so far. Then, if we were in the original loop, Primus should arrive on time. But for us, in the Blood intro, one of the first things we see is that they teleport in the wrong place, and then when they get to Richtofen, he says, "You're late!" So something's gone wrong. In the Blood intro, we do still see the characters being given the blood though. So the Richtofen that is in the lab in Blood of the Dead, who says you're late and is kind of worried about this news chain of events that he's just read about in the Chronorium, doesn't yet know that the blood is not going to be necessary. So there's basically Richtofen up here, who is just oblivious, Richtofen here, who sees things in a new light, but still doesn't see the full picture, and then a Richtofen we'll get to in a moment, who does know it all for some reason, and gets rid of the blood and just chucks it on the floor. In that intro cutscene, both Richtofens have no scar. Why that's the case, I don't know. Because up here, we have a scary boy coming through, and then at Zetsubo going to Alcatraz. In the comic, we don't see his face, so I guess that's actually probably Treyarch's way of saying, we're going to make this possible with both interpretations. We don't know if this is Scarboy or not. But in this chain of events, there's no Scar, and so that particular Richtofen, who arrives late with the crew at the beginning of Blood, might not have done any of this. He might not have gone to DE to get the Scar. We just don't know. Or alternatively, he did all this stuff because at this point he was no Scar Richtofen. He then got to the Giant, and then possibly sometime between the Giant and DE, when Richtofen got the Scar, he could have swapped places with a Richtofen that already had the Scar, and that Richtofen could be an imposter, and so we could have been playing with an imposter throughout all of Black Ops 3, and then the Richtofen without the Scar ends up somewhere else, and there's a deviation and a swap going on there. That's a possibility too. Putting that theory to the side for a second though, there's clearly some kind of discrepancy between what's going on in Zetsubo and the Richtofen that ends up in Blood of the Dead in that intro cutscene. Now, where things get even worse is that During the events of Blood of the Dead, our No Scar lad, who has just read this new Chronorium, he dips out, okay? Young No Scar just leaves. We don't know if he goes to Morgue City to get the summoning key. We don't know if he goes and secures an innocent Richtofen soul. We don't know if he delivers his soul to the house. We then don't know if he goes to the Giant. And if he doesn't go to the Giant, things are really weird because that seems to be the Richtofen that would be coming back in this loop, unless that loop is on a separate kind of track from this loop. Like, that could be a different timeline Richtofen that ends up going and actually coming through this path, and you could have kind of like parallel worlds, if that makes sense. So, he dips out, No Scar Richtofen in the intro, who arrives in the intro, stays in the map, doesn't seem to go anywhere as far as we can see. He's still got No Scar at the end of the intro, but then when we play the map, he has a scar. What? Things get really difficult to explain at this point. You're playing the map, he's got a scar. I mean, I can show you again on theatre right now. Where's our lad? Here he is. Why he has the scar there, I don't know, but it's clear, okay? It is super clear. So, you play the map as Richtofen with a scar. The intro guy has no scar though, and then you get to the end, Richtofen steps into the mechanism, okay? So you get to the boss fight, you seem to teleport into the boss fight, and that's a key detail, okay? You don't just walk through the door, you kind of teleport in sideways, which is really weird, but you then go through the boss fight, and Richtofen enters the dark mechanism. We then basically re-enter cutscene territory. Now, cutscenes are really the kind of tell, I guess, for us regarding what Treyarch are trying to convey with their storytelling, because these cutscenes are all rendered in-game, and what that means is that they're using the in-game character models to basically show us what's happening. And in the cutscene, the Richtofen in the machine has no scar. So despite the fact that we've been playing as Scar Richtofen during that match, and we've been playing as Scar Richtofen throughout Black Ops 3, who we were assuming was coming to Alcatraz at the beginning of this, and then going through the events of the actual map and stepping into the mechanism, instead, we see a no scar in the intro and a no scar in the outro. So it could be a mistake that while we play Blood, we're playing as Scarboy, but assuming that there's actually just some kind of swapping going on, we get to the end, and this is the really key detail. No Scar Richtofen is in the device, and then as soon as he steps in, who steps out of cryosleep but Primus Prime Richtofen with a scar on his face? What? It's so weird. This lad should not be here. He just shouldn't be. He's got a scar, it's very clear, he has freaking Nikolai's Firestone, which he should have left in its rightful place up here, but he steps out of cryosleep, he walks up, pretty leisurely, up into the boss fight arena, yoinks with the fire gem, and then all the zombie souls fly out of their bodies, and they're all done for, they're good, they're freed, whatever. Beautiful, lovely, wonderful, heartwarming. Not so heartwarming though, when we then see that he has a little interaction with No Scar Richtofen in the dark mechanism, and he's really short with him. He basically says, I don't give a damn about your little situation here. I wish I was sorry, and I wish I could say that to you, but I'm not. See ya. And he takes the summoning key from him, he unclips the blood from him, and he leaves him there to rot. Notice that all of the other characters don't say a single word to Richtofen. Not a single word to him. And so, these guys who have gone on a bit of a journey with him, they've met up with this mysterious doctor in Origins, and then they've waited 2 years, reunited with him, gone through the events of the Giant, and of Der Eisendrache, and Dempsey's just killed himself, and Zetsubo and Takeo's just killed himself, and they've bonded at this point. There has been a bond established, but then they're just like, oh, I should have just killed you, and they leave him there, again, to just die in the machine. They don't say a word to him. That weird kind of unfriendliness kind of plays into this whole theory. No Scar's blood ends up powering that device, and the portals open, and Primus Prime leaves with the other Primus cast. No Scar then presumably either dies or is trapped in an eternal purgatory, powering Brutus's little pocket dimension for the Shadow Man. We don't know where Primus Prime and the rest of the crew are gonna end up going next. That's a mystery for another video about the rest of the DLC season, essentially. That, though, is for now basically open to being anywhere. At some point, we know that they have to meet up with Ultimus. We know that Primus Prime Richtofen is now going to get subbed out at some point for Ultimus Richtofen, because that crew of the basically BO3 Primus minus Richtofen plus Ultimus Richtofen is going to go to the house at some point together, but we don't know any real other details about that just yet. But the point is, in all of this, the main key point is that we play as Scarboy throughout all of Black Ops 3, and we get attached to that character. And then in the ending, it's not Scarboy that's dying. It even makes sense with the character quotes that we have right at the end of that cutscene. No Scar in the machine says, "I wanted to keep going. I wanted to be me." Okay, those are the sorts of things that suspiciously sound very much like he is an imposter and he has stepped into the role of R. Richtofen, and he's basically saying, I wanted to be the one that did the hard work. That was going to be me. I was going to be selfish and take all the credit for this other lad doing all the work. I wanted to keep going. He says he was the nice one, he'd been witness to calamities. Do you know who I am? It's almost like he's a parody of himself at that point. He's just rattling off quotes that he knows that he has said in the past in hopes of trying to convince people that he is the Richtofen that we anticipated him to be and that we understood him to be. But it might well be, because he's missing that scar that's actually on this side of his face, that's not the Richtofen that we know. The Richtofen that we know has gone elsewhere somehow at some point, whether that was somewhere here during Zetsubou, whether that was somewhere here for something happening going on during Blood of the Dead. We don't really know as well if the normal events of Black Ops 3 actually happen prior to this alteration of the timeline. We don't know if the reason that the pages have changed of the Chronorium is because of something in the loop changing here. We know the paradox is broken, but we don't know why. On the topic of the kind of parody of himself, his quote where he says, "Oh, I thought you were going to let me bleed to death. It was so sad." That is a direct quote from Revelations. So he's literally just quoted himself, and he does that several times. I think at this point I've hopefully given you a clear idea of what I'm trying to get at in this video. We have events that we knew to be kind of concrete, and Treyarch have basically just completely distorted them now, with different orders of characters in the cryo chamber, with the Primus Prime Richtofen just turning up here for an unknown reason, and this Scar discrepancy where it seems like an imposter Richtofen has jumped in and taken the place of the Richtofen that should have sacrificed himself, and so in a way, Richtofen has sacrificed another Richtofen in order to save the universe, once again kind of yoinking his way out of danger. It's completely a classic Treyarch thing to do, to basically give us a cutscene that we interpret in one way, and then for them to basically say, actually, yeah, sorry, you were completely wrong about that, and that's not actually what happened. And I feel like that's what's happened here. They've basically made us all cry, they've made us all feel sad about Richtofen, and now they're going, yeah, so he was basically a body double, and he was an evil Richtofen trying to take the credit, and you cried for him, you pitiful human being, and now we're going to bring back the original one because he actually basically outsmarted you all and did something to circumvent his own death and sorted out the problem here. I think that the main things now to try and figure out are what happens in the next map if Treyarch end up going in a direction where this new Primus Prime Richtofen says some stuff about how he has gone to the Great War, seen the events that were happening here, and somehow basically created a plan to tell another version of himself from here somewhere to go back and do some other stuff in order to make sure that this body double version ended up being the one in the machine and not him. Like, if that happens, then we're cool, but if it doesn't, I don't know what to say, Chief. Is it a visual glitch? The reason that I hesitate so much on that point is because in that end cutscene, Treyarch have to put his model in the cutscene. They have to sit there and go, you're playing as Scar Richtofen during the game, but then, nope, we're not going to show you Scar Richtofen during the end cutscene, we're going to show you no Scar. That's a conscious decision that they have to have made. And so, I mean, I think it has to be something. But I don't know what that something is. I think that the moral of the story is that you were fooled and so was I. Because Richtofen does not die in the sense that we understood it in the Blood of the Dead end cutscene. Something else has happened, and it makes me very excited for where the hell the story's going to go in the future. Now, if you want to see more story videos like this on my channel, all you got to do is let me know with a comment. All you got to do, maybe a little like, maybe a subscribe, maybe you click the bell and you turn on notifications. But regardless of your chosen vehicle for showing me you want more of these videos, if there's a lot of support for it, I'll do it. Let me know, guys. I've been MrRoflWaffles. I'm so excited to make a whole bunch more story videos about Blood and all the other maps for the rest of this year. I'll see you guys very soon. Bye for now.